In today's episode, we are speaking with Steve Lowell, who has generated over $250,000 from one single webinar. So today we're going to cover how to create an automated evergreen webinar to increase sales in a very leveraged way so you can scale your business. So stick around. If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest. Welcome, Digital Trailblazers. Steve, we are super excited to have you with us today. You've done some really cool stuff with webinars. We're going to dive into the nuts and bolts and all of that. But for a little bit of context for the audience, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Steve Lowell. I've been in the professional speaking business for over 40 years. I first hit the live stage at 6 years old. So I'll let you determine how long ago you think that was. But I've been training speakers all over the world for over 40 years. And a big part of my business has been generating business through webinars because there are many places to speak. I'm a past president of something called the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. I'm in Canada. And I'm a past national president of that. In the United States, you have something called NSA, the National Speakers Association. And there are 17 such associations around the world for professional speakers. And they're in India, and they're in Singapore, and they're in Australia, and they're in New Zealand, and they're all over. And those 17 associations revolve around a central hub called the Global Speakers Federation. And I'm the past president of that. So unless somebody starts the Intergalactic Speakers Association, there's really nowhere else for me to go. So in all of those, in that journey with all of those associations, I learned a lot of different ways to leverage the spoken word. And one of them was by doing evergreen webinars. And it took me forever to figure out that piece of the puzzle. But we figured it out. We've made it work. And so I'd like to share some ideas with you and your audience about how they can do the same.
Awesome. And I love this conversation. I'm really excited to dive into this because I know for Todd and I, when we went from live webinar to automated webinar back in the day when we first launched our very first digital product, that was life-changing. The amount of revenue difference and the amount of scalability that we had changed everything for us. It was huge. So let's dive in. So structure. Why don't we start the basics, right? When it comes to an automated webinar, is the structure the same as a live webinar? Structure a little bit different? Or what should that structure be?
Yeah, so there's a lot of conversation about structure, and there are a number of different structures that work. But the thing is this, that there are some elements that have to be there, and the order in which they occur sometimes doesn't really matter. So it sort of works like this. We need to start with the outcome in mind. And the outcome, in my judgment, is one thing. And there's only one outcome that we should be shooting for. And that is to get the audience to either say, I want to talk to that one, or I want to buy from that one, or I want to hire that one. So they either want to do business with us, or they want to talk about doing business with us. That's the desired outcome. And so if we work backwards from that desired outcome right to the very beginning, what we need to do is understand the steps that it needs to take in order to get to that outcome. So if we start with that outcome, I want to talk to that one or I want to buy from that one, what is it that drives that? And what drives that is a sense of intrigue. And intrigue means the audience says, I got to have whatever that is. I don't know how that thing or that person is going to help me, but I have to have it. I got to find out what that is. And a big misconception that I've experienced in the webinar world and in the speaking world is they think that the outcome is I have to solve the audience's problem. I got to give a solution. I've got to inspire them. I got to motivate them. I've got to entertain them. I got to make them laugh and cry and think. And of course, all of those things are true. And you do have to do those things. But those are not the reasons why people are going to hire you and buy from you. People are not even going to hire you and buy from you if you offer a solution. Because if you offer a solution, 90 times out of 100, they're going to walk away thinking they have a solution and therefore they don't need you. So if we go backwards and work our way back, the outcome that we're trying to achieve before they say, I need to hire you, is an intrigue. And in order to get intrigue, what we need to do is we need to reveal a problem that they have, that they didn't know they had, because they can solve the seen, but they can't solve the unseen. So if we can figure out a way to reveal the unseen and leave them with that, what happens is they walk away with a great sense of value. Because what I've learned is clarity around why the problem exists is as much value as a solution to the problem. So we need to understand that the solution, that's what they pay us for. So we give them clarity around the problem. And so now we're still working backwards, right? So the outcome is, I want to talk to you or I want to buy from you. Why would I do that? Because I'm intrigued of what you've got. Why am I intrigued? Because you revealed something to me I didn't know before. And then we work backwards from there. And now in order to reveal something they didn't know before, we have to understand exactly what they perceive their problem to be. And we have to shake that belief. So this is where the difficult part is, and this is where most people miss the mark on their webinar, because this is the part where people tend to teach their stuff. They teach their content. Let me demonstrate my 3 pillars to this, my 5 strategies to that, or my 4 new functions to this, and that's when the sale gets lost. So a lot of speakers, coaches, authors, consultants who do these webinars, they spend an awful lot of time worrying about structure, do this and then this and then this and then this. And it is important to do that, but almost every single time the steps are incorrect. The steps are cookie cutter from a textbook somewhere or from a webinar that somebody taught them, and they don't work. And so the reason they don't work is because they look and sound like everybody else. So what we need to do is stop, starting with first do an introduction and then do this and then do that and go the other way. And we go, what's the outcome? What causes that outcome? What do I have to do to create that cause? And we work backwards. So my webinar, if we do that, my webinar is going to be profoundly different than yours because you solve a different problem. You reveal a different problem. So what is the structure? I don't know. It depends on what problem you're trying to reveal.
That was what you just said there, I think was just packed with so much information and value and insight. I think so many times when people are putting together webinars, they've probably done it in one of a few ways. Number one is that they've probably watched somebody else's webinar and they're just picking out the parts that they liked about it and just using that to kind of create their own webinar, not really knowing why they're doing it or why they shouldn't do this or that, right? And they don't really have a structure or a reason why they're doing things. They're just picking out things in somebody else's webinar that they liked, and that's kind of what they're doing. Or they've maybe bought a course or two on how to do a webinar. And more than once, I've seen this happen where people have bought multiple courses and they just take parts from one course that they liked and then parts from another course that they liked, and they kind of exclude other things. And they end up with this monstrosity that just doesn't generate sales.
You sound like you've got experience in this just like I do.
Yeah.
That sounds just like my strategy for about 20 years.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And then people are wondering, well, why didn't it work? And they blame the webinar. They're like, oh, well, webinars don't work, right? Or the traffic is low quality, or they blame these other things when it's really, you got to work on that message. And I think the thing that you said in there that really was the key was when you said you have to tell them something they don't know and give them clarity as to why they're having the problem. And the analogy that we often use for this is, imagine going to a doctor and suggest a radical surgery for you, right? You're much more likely to go through that surgery if you have a specific diagnosis, right? That's the thing that they didn't know. Like, they know that they have these symptoms, they know that they're having these problems, but without that specific diagnosis, right? The thing that they didn't know before, the reason why they're having that problem, if they don't have that diagnosis, now that surgery is kind of experimental. It's like, oh, we can try this, it might work, right? But we're not sure because we don't really know what's wrong. But once you have that diagnosis, people are going to be much more likely to go through with the treatment. So it's like going to a doctor and having that. When you can reveal that to somebody, I think that's just genius. Like you said, you reveal something that they didn't know, the reason why they're having the problem, and then they're much more likely to actually buy from you at the end.
Yeah. And sometimes it's about revealing a problem. So other than, like, sometimes they'll walk away thinking, okay, now I know why my problem exists, and now I have to fix this problem, and therefore I need this speaker. And that works. I mean, that fulfills the requirement. But you know what? Sometimes, Todd, they walk away with, wow, I've got a whole new problem. I don't even know where to start. I didn't even know I had that problem. And that's just as good. as you know. And so either way, what we've done is we've given them clarity around the nature of their condition, a clarity which they didn't have before. And it's that changing of perspective that actually gives you the credibility as the speaker, because you just didn't lay out a whole bunch of information for them. Anybody can do that. If it's about the information, send me a PDF. I'll take it to the bathroom and read it. I don't need to be there at the speaker, right? But if we take them on this path where they get a new sense of awareness, we rattle their beliefs a little bit, we shake their paradigms, we challenge their beliefs, we reveal something to them that makes them go, I had no idea. Then you're the one as the speaker that revealed that to them. So that makes you the authority. It makes you the sage. Why on earth would they go to anybody else?
And that's the other thing too, is that you can't just tell them things that they already know, right? Like if you just recite to them the problem that they're already having, they're like, yeah, I already know that. If they leave the presentation with the same beliefs that they had when they entered the presentation, well, their current actions are based off of their current beliefs. So if their beliefs don't change, their actions aren't going to change, and there's no sale. So I love what you said about you need to give them something they didn't know before, because once you've changed those beliefs, well, now they're presented with new information that they have to take action on, right? Now they have to, it's either buy your course or try to figure out this new problem on their own, right? And more likely than not, I think they would buy the course if you made a compelling argument.
Yeah, and if we go back to the original question about structure, we can go through, start with this and then do this and then do this, and you'll talk to 100 different webinar experts and they'll give you 100 different structures with some common elements. But here's what makes people actually act. In most cases, people make a major action decision based on emotion, and then they validate it based on logic and intellect. So what we need to do is, and this is sort of the way I've learned to do it, is, there's an order of events that I take them through, but the purpose of the order of events is not to fulfill specific functions within the webinar, is to take them on a specific emotional journey through the webinar. And so, we do that with stories and other different techniques that we have. But if we think about the webinar as an emotional journey rather than a function of steps, then we can see that the order in which the steps occur are less relevant than the journey upon which we take the listener and the participant. So we want to think of the webinar as an emotional journey. What are the different emotions we want them to experience and acknowledge as we go through? And there's logic and there's psychology behind that.
Yeah. One of the things you brought up was, telling your story. From the webinars that I've reviewed, this is often where people turn their webinar into a train wreck. They tell this long, drawn-out story that goes in directions that it doesn't need to go. And I don't know what it is, what compels people to think that they need to do it. And we're guilty of this too, right? We've done it in the past. But I found like the more brief and concise you are with your story, and the more impactful you are, the better off you are, rather than trying to be elaborate and detailed and things like that. But do you find the same thing, or what do you feel like are the most important things about telling your story in the webinar?
Okay, you've hit upon something so critically important, because you're right. I mean, most people either have not been trained to do this, or they've been trained in a manner that does not serve them for the purpose of converting in a webinar. And so some years ago, I created a program called the 1 Minute Story Template. And what it does is it takes your story and it walks you through this process so that you can tell your entire story in less than 60 seconds and have it impactful. Because there are only 3 critical points to the story. And so what we need to do is zero down to those 3 critical points. And what I do when I'm teaching clients is I work with them until we get each of those 3 points down in a single sentence so that they can literally tell their entire story in 3 sentences. And that takes an enormous amount of work to get there, and it's difficult because people want to put in all the details. So we trim out all the details, get down to a single sentence for these 3 points, and then we expand on it with the important data and information that needs to go in order to fulfill the purpose. But what we found is basically there are 3 primary functions of stories when we're using stories to generate business, to convert. There are 3 primary functions of stories. One is to demonstrate your skill. Now, that doesn't mean tell your skill. It means demonstrate your skill. Give the audience a visual. So, for example, I've got a story where, and I do this very, very often. I've done it all over the world, where I ask the audience, put up your hand if you or somebody knows in the market for a tennis instructor. And no hands ever go up. Once in the blue moon, one hand goes up. Then I tell them a little story about Brian. It takes about 30 seconds. And then I ask the audience again, put up your hand if you just might know somebody who's in the market for a tennis instructor. And all of a sudden, every hand in the room goes up. That whole process can take a minute, or usually it takes about 5 because I, beef it up. But I can do it in 1 minute. So that story reveals, it demonstrates what I can do because the audience sees a change right there. And so if you have a story that you can use to demonstrate what you can do, that's extremely powerful. So that's the first outcome. The second outcome is to reveal something about you, reveal something about your character or your personality or your presence and the way you show up or what you stand for, what you believe in. And again, there are certain stories that you can tell in a minute or less that will reveal those things about you. So that's the second outcome. The third outcome of stories is to validate the results that you provide. So these are, mini testimonial stories, case studies, telling a short story about a client you had that had a great result, and you do that in 60 seconds or less. So if you've got these stories, and most people, if you dig enough, you'll find these stories somewhere in your history. We find these stories, and then if you can include at least one of those types of stories in your webinars or when you're speaking or whenever, it really it delivers a lot of power to that audience, Todd, because the audience goes, wow, I just watched this happen, right? Wow, I like this person. I know something about this person now. And okay, I'm not the only one who says so, and they're not the only one who says so. There are others. So when you've got that package and you can do it through very short stories, it can become really, really, really powerful.
So I know that in a live webinar, when we're doing something live, like an important part of that is trying to foster engagement. So we'll often, whenever we're making a point or something, we'll say, yeah, do you agree? Drop a 1 in the comments if you agree, or let me know if you've had the same problem. If this resonates with you, drop a 1 in the comments, whatever it is. We're always trying to get that engagement. Now, on an automated webinar, obviously, I suppose we could do that, but I don't know if that would necessarily be effective. How do you navigate that with an automated Evergreen webinar? Do you still try to do that, or is that just something that you cut out and you don't even pretend like you're trying to get engagement?
Yeah, so I love that question because I struggled with that for a long, long time with the automated webinars. And what I've come to realize is I have not yet found a way to fake it, right? To simulate engagement when there's no real audience there. I mean, now there is some new technology, which I have not tried for webinars yet, but there is a new technology where you can make a webinar that actually has interactive actions to it. So, you, instead of asking them to type in the chat, yes or no, and they click on yes or click on no, and it takes them down a path. So you could do that. It's a big job to create it, but that can be done. But without doing that, what I've learned is that you don't actually need to get people physically engaged. It's the same when we're on a platform or on a screen or even in a live webinar. We don't always have to get them physically engaged. They don't always have to type something or do something. Engagement is very significant when it comes from the mind. I mean, when you're sitting there binge watching Yellowstone right on TV, you're engaged, right? Or if you're binge watching something, you're binge watching it not because they're having you press buttons and answer questions. You're binge watching it because they've got you right on the edge of your seats. So this is why when you're creating an Evergreen webinar, you've got to step up the game in terms of being able to capture and hold their attention using stories, using presence, using information that captivates, that inspires, using information that the best kind of information is information that makes them go, oh, I've never heard that before. I've never seen it like that before. I'm in the wrong spot. Like if they can watch what you're doing and listen to what you're doing and apply it to their own lives or their own circumstances, they're engaged. But if you do exactly what you said a few minutes ago, Todd, you just tell a story and spend forever telling it, they become disengaged. So you've got to engage them intellectually. You've got to engage them emotionally. You've got to engage them. You got to get past their intellect and into their imagination so that they are engaged in that way. And that's a big, big part of Evergreen webinars because we can't ask them to answer questions or wave their hand or do all the things that we would normally do. So that's the kind of engagement that we need to master.
And I think that's a good point. Like the engagement, whether you fake it or not, and all these little tricks that we try to get people to participate, like that might be like the top 1% or top 5%. Whereas, like you said, telling a compelling story that's impactful and short is much more important to your webinar than trying to get the engagement, right? It's these other factors that are going to really generate the sales rather than, that top 1% or 5%, the frosting on the cake, right? that's going to help your webinar. So I love that you make that point, because a lot of times people focus so much on how to do that, whereas, the important stuff is what they're missing. So when we're automating this, I know that there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's people that, for the longest time, everyone was doing like a simulated live, where it was, they're pretending to be live. They're doing the fake engagement. They had the chat roll that was, pre-recorded, that was, automatically going. And do you find that that's still effective anymore? Or can you just put like a video on a page and not even pretend like you're live? Does it make a difference? Have you seen it, or have you done any comparisons between the two?
Yep, lots of them. And you're right. When I first saw, the software that could do all the simulated things, it would simulate a full room and things. I thought that was cool, but I never really bought into it. I tried it. I didn't like it. It didn't work out well. But here's what I do now with these is I have a recording of me. Let's say I'm dressed like this. Okay. So you go in and you register for the webinar and I come on and I might say something like this. Okay. I say, hey, I'm Steve Lowell. Thanks for joining us today. Listen, I am here live standing by with my phone, and I'll pull up my phone. I'm live standing by with my phone. So you're going to be watching a replay of a great webinar. If you have questions along the way, you just go ahead and type them in the chat window. I'll get them on my phone and I'm going to get back to you right away. So thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the webinar. Here I am in the recorded version. And then the new recording will come up and I'll be dressed differently, right? And then I start the webinar. Now, both of them are recorded, right? But what I say is I'm standing by live with my phone to answer all your questions. And I am standing by live with my phone. I just happen to be in my boat fishing when I'm doing it, but my phone is here, right? And so I like that type of thing because I get lots of comments, I get lots of questions, and it's just like a text message. So I text it back, and it goes right back to them. So that's a really good way to do it. I can always tell when something is simulated when I'm participating in it, and what I find is that it just puts a little bit of a black cloud now. What else do they simulate? What else are they not telling me the truth about? What else are they trying to, pull over my eyes? So I like to let the audience know, listen, this is a recording, but I'm here. And so, and that seems to work. And so that's where we got the best results. And that way, I don't know if this has been your experience, you guys, but when I do a live webinar, I like to see a lot of people sometimes, I don't know if you've seen people in the speaking business with egos, but I'm one of them. I've got an ego. I like to see a big list of people there. But, I've learned this. I've learned that as few as one person in the webinar can be substantially valuable because you never know how that's going to transpire. And so the Evergreen webinars, when they're running, I know they're running because I get a little message, somebody's watching the webinar. And I'm always there to make sure to answer the call. And so it works out really well.
I think that, like you said, people can typically tell that it's not real. And maybe in the beginning when this technology first came out, because we've been doing automated webinars since like 2017, 2018. And that's kind of the time when, and back then I think we only had maybe one or two options to do like a simulated live where there was a chat roll and everything else like that. And I think in the beginning, maybe people believed it, but it was pretty quick for people to figure out that these were not really being played live and they were fake. And now it's like everybody just almost assumes that even a live webinar is automated, right? Like now it's just so overdone, like people kind of just assume that. But when you are trying to pretend to be live when you're not really live, I think one of the things that does that's really harmful to your sales is it breaks trust. Right? Just like you said, people start wondering, well, if they're faking this, what else are they trying to pull the wool over my eyes over? And that can actually hurt sales. Like you said, just coming out right up front and just saying, hey, this is recording, but I'm here live. I'm going to be answering your questions. I love that because I think it's a good mix between the two. Is that, you're still there, you're answering questions, but you're just being upfront that this is pre-recorded. So when you do that, are you still having people register for a specific date and time to watch the webinar, or is this just something where they opt in and they can immediately go in and watch a video?
Right. So we've run all the different ways. And so the way that seems to work best for us is some of the applications that are out there, and most of them will do this now, is where you can set it up so that when the person goes in and registers, they have an option of a couple of times. And it doesn't matter which one they select, because what will happen is the video will play for them at the time they select, right? So one of the things we like to do is give them an option of the top of that, like within the next 15 minutes. And usually it's at quarter after half hour, at the 15-minute mark. So let's say that they see this at 20 to the hour. One of the options is going to be at quarter to the hour. So that's in 10 minutes. I can do it then. And what we found is if they have options, they will select one. And if it's within 15, 20 minutes or a half hour, that's normally where they will select. And the show up rate is much higher than if it's now. Because it seems to be, if they get the sense where, now I'm not like this, if it's now, I'm watching it now, if that's what I want to do. But it seems to be, if they get a sense that, I can do it anytime I want to, now's not a good time for me, then they never get to it. But if they get a sense that, it's in 10 minutes, I got 10 minutes to go get a coffee and get this thing done and get back to my computer because it starts in 10 minutes. There's this sense of urgency there, and the show up rate seems to be higher. And then when they log in at the right time, the webinar will play for them at that time, right? And so that worked out the best for us.
Interesting. Okay. So when you're scheduling this, do you schedule for like kind of these weird times? Like, would it be like 3:10 p.m. or 3:15 p.m.? Would it be like off times like that? Or do you schedule like maybe the just-in-time webinar is every half hour, so it might be 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30?
Yeah, so we've done that too. Every half hour, every hour, we've tried a bunch. Now, we haven't tested this extensively. We just did a couple of tests, figured out what was working, kind of went with that. But what tended to work the best was when we could schedule it for the next top of the hour or the next quarter of the hour, the next half hour, and the next 3/4 of an hour, right? So regardless of what time they register, there's one within 14 minutes. And I don't really know the psychology behind that. That just tended to work best for us. But there was one, though. I created something called a virtual world tour. And really all it was 11 different occurrences of a webinar, put registration pages for every time zone in the world. So there were like 22 or 23 different time zones. So wherever you were, you registered for one of the, I think, 11 occurrences because it covered the whole world that way. So when you went in to register, you could see every major city in the world, and it looked really impressive, right? So people sign up, and those I had specific times, and I selected those specific times based on the best times in the various time zones, so that somebody in India didn't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch this, right? And so we did it that way. Then what I found was my intention was to do all of those live, but I did the first one, and I thought that went quite well, and it was recorded. So I thought, I'm just going to set the recordings up for the rest of the times. And so every other time was a recording, and I just sat there with my phone and waited for the questions to come in. And that's, we did really well that way. So those are the two major ways that work the best. So just to recap really quick, every 15 minutes at the quarter hour. And then that one was, I think we had 3 times a day, very specifically selected so that everybody in the world could hit one of those 3 times at a comfortable time of day.
Gotcha. Okay. And then as far as the recorded part of the webinar, are you just taking a previous live webinar that you did, like a recording from a previous live, or is this something that you're just sitting down at your computer and recording and editing out?
Yeah, I shouldn't say I never used a live one. I have, but what I do, I have a whole studio here. You can't really see the whole thing here, of course, but I get in the studio and I record it for that webinar. Then I edit it, which means I'll put it through iMovie or whatever, and I will, add graphics and proper transitions and it looks like a produced video. And I feel okay doing that because they know it's a recording. So I want them to have the best possible experience. Now, it doesn't mean I take all the ums and ahs out because I don't want to remove the humanity of it, right? But just like if we're doing an event, similar to this one, if we stumble on something, we just pause and we start again, or we'll go back and edit it. So I do that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay. And as far as the presentation itself, are you just doing a talking head video? Is it a PowerPoint slide, or is it a PowerPoint slide with your picture in the corner, or does it matter?
It sounds like a simple question, but it's not. So I'll answer it this way. I use PowerPoint as a very, very, very minimally. I use something else called Mimo Live, and I can't demonstrate it right here because I haven't got set up for this. But you see this thing up in the corner here? That's by me. So I have a system where I can put information like that, and I can put it on and off, and I can put scrolling text here. I can put images here. I can put things that I can interact with here on the screen, and I manage it from an iPad. So it's me speaking like this, and then instead of putting up a PowerPoint slide, I want to talk about a point, so I'll step aside, and an image like this will pop up, and I'll talk about this image and point at it, and then I hit my iPad, and it goes away, and then another one comes up. So I interact with these things on the screen. And then I'll also have video clips of things. So if I'm doing a case study or something, I want to show an example, I'll use video clips. And I do use PowerPoint slides, but usually it's not me and a shared screen. I use a system where I will be on like half the screen and my slide will be here because I want to interact with my visuals. But you know what my best visual is, bar none, live and on stage? My best visual is this. I everywhere in the world, I use a flip chart, and usually when I'm speaking live, I have two of them on the stage. And so even when I'm doing a webinar, I'll do what I just did now. I'll say, let me just grab my flip chart. I'll go and pull my flip chart here, and I engage with it. I flip the pages. I can scribble on it. So I want my visuals to be interactive in the sense. I don't want to be a talking head with my little face in the corner. So I very rarely do that.
One of the other things that I know is really important for if you're doing a sales webinar where you're actually making an offer at the end for like an online course or something like that. One of the most important things that drives sales is generating that urgency and scarcity with deadlines, right? Deadlines for a special price, deadlines for bonuses, those sorts of things. With an automated evergreen webinar, do you still do that, or do you just not even bother with that part of it? And then if you do the deadlines and things like that, how do you manage that if people can register any day at any time?
Right. Yeah. So I generally don't do that on evergreens anymore. I did, but that was my conundrum. Is I try to be as integral as possible, right? And so it's true. I mean, if I put up a price up there and the countdown is down and it's over, you can still buy it at that price. I'm not going into my system and changing the price at the end of every evergreen webinar, right? So I don't do that anymore. So what I would do is something like this. I might say, and I usually hold this to be true, especially if it's an event that they're signing up to, something like that. There's a certain number, a certain number. So we're going to release this number of them, and we try and stick to that as much as possible. So in that case, urgency becomes a bit of an issue. But with my evergreen webinars, we started not selling lower ticket items on the webinars and started selling higher ticket items. And so what we started doing is not selling them on the webinar. What we were doing is booking a call on the web. And the reason we did that is because what we always found, we never were able to really crack the code where we could generate enough automated sales to cover the cost of everything we were doing and sell smaller ticket items. And even then, the smaller ticket items that we found, we had to fulfill a lot of things, and it was a lot of work to fulfill a lot of these things. And so we never really cracked that code. But what we were able to do was to crack the high ticket item code, which was much better for us. And so for there was less about urgency in terms of availability or pricing, and more about urgency of you solving the problem, as in, how much longer are you going to let this go on, right? TikTok, right? Every minute that you don't do this is costing you a client, like that kind of urgency. And so that worked out well for us.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I know that in the past, we've used software like a Deadline Funnel. It's a countdown software that will automatically, it tracks every registrant individually, and it gives them their own deadline. So, if somebody entered the webinar, say today, and the deadline was, 48 hours, basically 2 days at midnight, right? You could program it that way so that if they registered today, it would automatically give them that deadline. And then the link that they would click on, depending on when they clicked on it, if they clicked on it before the deadline, it would send them to one sales page with the special offer. And if they clicked on it after the deadline, it would go to the other sales page with the full price offer, right? So you can kind of manage it that way. But the thing is that there's, if people know how to change their IP address, or if they get in with a different email, sometimes they can get around that, because that, that's the way it tracks them, is with cookies and with their email address, and I think even with their IP address. So there's still ways around that for people who know. When we were using it, I don't know, I guess we never tested without it. So So I don't know if it was really helping or not, but I know that we've used that in the past, and there's other software that does similar stuff. So I know it can be done. And here's the other thing: is it believable? Even if you give them that deadline and it's real, would people even believe it if it's an automated webinar, right?
And I think just for clarity's sake, because we were talking about low ticket and high ticket, everyone has a slightly different definition of what that is. So for the audience, if you can clarify for that, please.
Well, like you said, you're right. Of course, everybody has a different perspective on what that is. So, for us, a low ticket is anything, under $300 kind of thing, $97. And the reason we got out of that business was because, again, we spent a lot of money driving traffic to those webinars, right? We were getting the conversions, I guess, but the cost of the traffic was, always superseded the revenue we were making. So we had a really hard time with that code. So high ticket for us now is anywhere from, 10 to 45,000. And so you're not going to sell that on an Evergreen webinar. People are not going to come and say, hey, I think I'll whip out my credit card and lay down 10 grand. That doesn't happen. So for us, for our business, we find it a lot easier and a lot more productive for us to set up appointments. And then we can, we can usually serve them in some way after we talk to them. And that's the business that we want to be in anyway. So that's what we do now. So, and I go back quickly, Todd, to what you said about, the perception of the truth of these, the scarcity pieces. And I kind of struggle with that too. I question them every time I'm on a webinar, right? I pretty much guarantee that if I find a way back in after this thing reaches zero, I'm getting that price. And if I'm enough to think that way, then everybody's smart enough to think that way. And it does. I understand the concept of the scarcity. I do understand it because I feel it when I'm watching it happen. I feel it. So I get it. I understand it. But I think people do question it. And I think it does just add that little extra seed of doubt in terms of, how legitimate is this really? And I don't really want questions about my legitimacy when I'm trying to do business like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the first time that Leah and I became an affiliate of kind of a bigger marketer out there. And we were joining an affiliate call because he was launching a new online course. And he was describing like the schedule of everything that was going to happen. It's like, okay, this day we're going to promote this email. This day we're going to promote this email. And then this day the cart closes and we're going to do a final call. And then here we're going to do a cart reopen and we're going to open up the cart again, blah, blah. And I was like, wait, so that first one is fake? Like that was the first time I really realized that the scarcity was fake and they had always planned on reopening the cart later on to get more sales and just milk it for everything they could. I just felt like really betrayed. It's like I lost trust in this person because of that. And I was like, well, that's not the way that I want to run my business. Like if to me, that's just not in integrity, right? To try to drum up sales with fake scarcity and plan all along that, we're going to open it up again. So that's just something that we never did because like you said, that trust, like people, especially right now with all the AI, with all the bots, with all the automation and everything, I think people really just crave authenticity. And I think right now, that's the thing that's really going to help you to sell is just being super authentic and trustworthy and building that because it's so easy to lose and it's so rare right now that if you have that, got to hold on to it.
Yeah, I agree. And we just finished a 3-day event last week and we do the cart closes. We do our offer on the event's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We do the offer on the Tuesday. Cart closes at Sunday at midnight. And two things. Number one is when the cart's closed, it's closed. And you can't get it at that price after that. And that's the first thing. The other thing is that when, in this particular event, we say this offer will never occur again. That offer will never occur again. It just won't because of that. That integrity piece is really important because it's just like a story, A lot of speaker coaches will say, your story doesn't have to be true or it needs to be based on truth or something. And I just so disagree with that. I think your story, whatever story you tell, absolutely must be true. It doesn't have to be accurate. That means, if it happened 5 years ago or 7 years ago, if it changes the fundamental trueness of the story, that's a problem. If it doesn't change the fundamental trueness of the story, then it's not a problem. But the story needs to be true. And I'll give you an example of this. I heard 3 speakers a couple of years ago. I heard 3 different speakers at 3 different events tell the exact same story and represent it as their own. And so I know that the exact same thing didn't happen to all 3 speakers. And now I don't believe anything any of them say. Right. And so that integrity piece, I think, is so critical. It is really important.
Yeah, that sounds like the problem a lot of our politicians have here.
I don't know. I haven't noticed that myself. We don't have that issue up here in Canada. They're all squeaky clean, and you can trust everything they say up here.
Oh, that's so refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
So types of products that you've seen that sell really well with automated webinars.
Yeah. Online courses tend to sell really well. But for us, like I say, the appointments are the best sellers by a mile. And I say best sellers because this is where, by a massive margin, most of our revenue comes in. We'd have to sell an awful lot of online courses to match something, a one-on-one client kind of thing, right? But if you're at the level where, you don't have a big high ticket item and you're selling, online courses or events or master classes, all of those work really well. But what I've found in our experience is online courses in the lower level, the lower ticket items, they were the ones I think that sold the best. And not long online courses. These are courses that take an hour or less to complete. And the lessons are no more than 6 minutes long. There's all kinds of studies done by MIT and a bunch of others that 6 minutes is the maximum learning curve in an online course. So, mini courses, mini learning experiences, micro learning experiences at a reasonable price, they tend to go really, really well on Evergreen webinars.
That thing you mentioned earlier about driving paid traffic and the issue with profitability, that's something that we ran into when we were selling our first courses as well. And the thing is, we didn't realize it at the time, but with our very first course that we sold, we were selling it for $297, right? $300. And we were profitable with it. We were, for our live webinars, I think we were turning around anywhere between 3 to 5 times return on ad spend. And then when we went automated, I think it was 2 to 3 times return on ad spend. So it went down, but it was still very profitable. We didn't realize at the time that was like a unicorn event that was not going to last. And we had problems replicating that later on because ad costs went up or, whatever it was. And it didn't even occur to us to increase profitability either by raising our prices or having upsells or things like that. We just kind of had this expectation that, oh yeah, you just create a course, you sell this one course, and it's laptop lifestyle for the rest of your life, right? And so later on, we figured out that in order to have an actual legitimate, profitable business that's going to last long term, you need to have much more of an offering than just an online course, right? Just one online course. So I think that's a really important part, whether you have something high ticket that you sell in the back end, or you've got other lower ticket things that you can sell to the same people. That's just going to be a really important part, whether you're doing automated webinars or not.
We were fortunate enough to have the experience you had. We have invested, I kid you not, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in ad spend with near zero results. But I can tell you this, we now have somebody in place. And last week when we did that live event that I just mentioned to you, we have somebody in place who made us an offer we couldn't refuse. They were going to drive traffic with the Facebook ads. So we bought back into it. In the last several years, I'm steel wall. Facebook ads or paid ads ain't happening in my life anymore. But my wife, Jane, who runs our business, convinced me. We did that. And the first time, we're well in the black on that one. And so now I have a proof of concept. And I really think, I think it's about having somebody in place who just doesn't know how to do this, but has dedicated the nature of their existence to doing this. All of this lady wants to do is get up in the morning and get in the stats and get in the algorithm and she lives and breathes this stuff. It's not part of who she is or what she does. It's who she is. And so she's proven to us, okay, there is some potential here. So we're going to do it again. All right. So we made more than we spent. That's never happened before. So now we have somebody in place, and now I've got a little touch of faith there. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I'd say that when we automated our webinar, it was like a daily task to go in and look at the ads and the metrics and tweak things and just get in there and really get granular with it. That was really key in keeping that webinar profitable for us. So sometimes it just takes an expert to be able to do that.
Yeah. And this is why I think you've heard me say this before, I keep saying, that automated sales, it's a myth. Well, I know a lot of people are generating automated sales from their webinars, but then if you back off and you take a look at what you just said, it's every day. You got to go in and you got to nurture this. You got to practice that. And you got to make sure and follow up with your team. And you got to put in ad spend. And all of that is the work, right? So is it automated? Yeah. After you do the work, like people, it's just like saying, I get an automated paycheck every 2 weeks. It just comes. I go, and I go, well, how did it get automated? Well, I get up and go to work every day. It's really interesting. I put in 8 hours a day, every day for 2 weeks, and my check just comes to me. It's automated, right? So, right. So it's the same thing. So what we found is, if we're going to so-called automate something, what we want to automate is we want to automate the interest. And if that happens through webinars, great. If it happens through doing these kinds of things, being on podcasts with great folks like you, then great. If it comes from speaking engagements, great. If it comes from ads, great. So we wanted to get all these engines running that are automating the interest so that we can put it through the sales process and generate the revenue. But is it automated? It's just like, on one of your sessions I was listening to, somebody was talking about network marketing and passive income. Well, I don't know about you. I know lots of people who have made millions of dollars in network marketing and none of it was passive, right? I mean, they worked their tails off to make that passive income. So I think from that perspective, I kind of think it's a bit of a myth. And that's why I think we have to do things we absolutely love, because there's that old adage you've heard, I'm sure, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. We love what we do. You love what we do. So in that situation, I guess all of our revenue is automated.
Yeah. Everything you said, I think, is just so true. I know that we're kind of running out of time here, but I just got one quick question. Webinar software. I know that we've talked a lot about, different functionality and scheduling times and just-in-time webinars and things like that. Is there a webinar software that you like to use that you can recommend, or are there a handful of them, or does it not matter?
Yeah, there's a handful of them. I don't think it matters much now because they all kind of do the same thing. We started off with Stealth Seminar. That's probably one of the originals. It's been around for a long time. It's very, very, very good. But what I found with that is it was pretty pricey to begin with because it was one of the originals, and it kind of stayed that way. And some others came out, like Webinar Jam came out. That's a pretty good one. And there are some others that I've seen. I don't recall what they are. But once you get inside them, they all look pretty much the same. I think they're all using like the same engine. It's just like with all the new AI things, you got ChatGPT, and then you got all these other ones that all come from ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is the foundation upon which all of them are pretty much built. So you get into them and they all kind of look the same, a few bells and whistles, little colors, but they do the same thing. They act the same way. They have the same features. So I would start with Stealth Seminar only because I've used it for many years. I trust it. I know it works. I like it. It's easy to use. And then Webinar Jam is another one, and almost identical. So I don't think it really matters. What you want to do is go in and say, which one feels good for the price?
Yeah, and I know that we've tried both of those. And like you said, Stealth Seminar that was an excellent software, but it is a little bit on the pricey side. But everything that we needed to do, that thing would do.
Yeah, it was when I saw that came out, I thought it was Tom Antion that introduced me to that. I don't know if you know who Tom Antion is, but he introduced me to that. And what really got me on it was I was at his place one time, and at his big, massive mansion. And this is back, we're going back maybe, 20 years or something. And he said, "Hey, Steve, come and look at this." And he was sitting in his lazy boy chair, and he had his laptop on a board that went across the arms, and he was running an automated webinar. He said, "Look at this." And I went and looked at it, and the webinar was just ending. And every time somebody would buy, his computer would literally go ka-ching, okay? And it started to go ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. He got up to almost $100,000 in about 3 minutes. I'm going, that's what I said. I got to get me some of that, okay? That was the code I was never able to break. And it turns out that he had spent decades trying to master that. And he did. And it was amazing watching him work. But that was way back then. It was 20-something years ago. Times have changed. People have changed. People are aware. People are skeptical. Like there's the whole ecosystem of that cyberspace piece has changed.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Steve. We could probably go on for way too long. But we really appreciate you. This has been great. If people want to check you out or learn more about you, where should they head?
Yeah, just my website, stevelowell.com. Everything is there.
Okay. Thank you so much, Steve.
Well, this has been great. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.